The Dynamic Island debuted back alongside the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max, so now with the 16 lineup, we're technically on Gen 3 of that same Dynamic Island, and when it first released, a lot of people thought it was more gimmicky and it was just to kind of differentiate between the Pro and the non-Pro, but now, almost 2.5 years later, it's one of those utility things that I pretty much can't live without. So here are 15 ways that I actually use my Dynamic Island on a day-to-day basis that I think you guys will be surprised about. Let's get into it. So now before we get started, I do want to mention a few things about the anatomy of the Dynamic Island and how to use it and how to physically interact with it. So first and foremost, you might notice that I have two things going on here, and that is because there are two applications currently using live activities and Dynamic Island use cases. So in order to actually interact with each one of them, you can actually tap on them individually. So this one right here is my Pixel Pal, so you can open that up and we'll touch on what that is in a second. And the second one is this 3 right here, which is Dynamic Notes that I've been kind of testing out, which I really like. So again, it'll go in the order and retract itself back into the Dynamic Island in the order of latest used. So you can see that the last one that I used was this one, so it popped up on the main Dynamic Island. And then the second thing I want to mention is that if you do have applications that are running and you don't want to see the Dynamic Island kind of notification, you can actually just swipe it away. So if you swipe like this, it'll get rid of the first one, and if you swipe it again, it'll get rid of the other one. So now you have nothing on the Dynamic Island, but the live activities are still going, as you can see right here. And then also, if you don't have anything running on the Dynamic Island, you can like long press on here, and then you can see that it does have a little bit of an animation there. So if I bring this up, you can see that the Dynamic Island kind of bobs with what you're doing, and then to bring back those Dynamic Island features, you just swipe at them again and swipe at it one more time, and then all of them do show up. So that is how you interact with the Dynamic Island. And then secondly, when it comes to a settings standpoint, there is no dedicated Dynamic Island settings section, but if you do want to know if you have a Dynamic Island variation or use case for your certain application, all you have to go is go into your settings and go into each individual application. So for instance, I'm going to go into Dynamic Notes, and you're going to want to have live activities turned on. If you have live activities turned on, then more likely than not, I want to say about 95% of the time, it will show up on your Dynamic Island for that fact. So as you can see, I have my two Dynamic Island situations here, and if I go down to my notifications, you can see that these are both of the live activities that correspond with the Dynamic Island. But now that we have all those settings out of the way, let's actually jump into what I use this thing for. Well, alright, let's get into some of the more native ones by Apple. So let's start off with the flashlight, because the flashlight got a nice little revamp on iOS 18. So as you can see, when you turn on the flashlight, I have it turned on here, that you can see that it pops up in the Dynamic Island, but if you long press on there, you actually get this brand new animation. So you can actually change what it looks like from a actual brightness standpoint. So you can see here that it's getting brighter and dimmer, as you can kind of see behind the phone that it's kind of going down and up. And you can actually change how narrow the flashlight is. So if you move it this way, you can see that it kind of pinpoints over, versus moving it back out, it's a little bit of a wider light. So that is a flashlight in iOS 18 via the Dynamic Island, and to turn it off, you just tap it again, and now it's completely turned off. The next thing I want to do is in the clocks. So of course, the clock is going to have a bunch of different versions when it comes to the stopwatch. So if I press start here, you can see that it shows up in the Dynamic Island, and of course, if you long press, you're able to interact with it here a little bit. So you can pause it, you can press play again to start it up, you can press this to lap it up, and you can get a little bit more information here. And of course you can tap into it to get back into the application, and that's going to be a running theme. Normally with these Dynamic Island activities, you can tap into them to go directly into the application itself, and then we can stop that there, and then you can also have your alarms and then timers as well. So if I set maybe a 11-second timer and swipe up, you can see that that timer does show up there, and then eventually it will ring for you on the actual timer itself on the Dynamic Island. So give it a second, and then you can see that the timer is going off and my phone is buzzing. So this next one has to do with your AirPods Pro, or just any AirPods in general. If you open them up, you can actually see that they're going to be connected, and then they're going to show up on your Dynamic Island. So if I pull one out, and then it should ideally connect into the Dynamic Island, and you can see that it does show up there, and if I tap on it, you can see that it showed not only the battery indicator, but then that it's actually moved over to the iPad. So you're able to then move it back and forth between the AirPods on different devices if you do know what you're doing when it comes to Dynamic Island. I like it more so to see the battery indicators overall, but then able to move it between all of my iDevices as well as my Mac OS device is something that I love when it comes to the AirPods Pro. This next one is going to be when you receive a call and also when you're on an actual phone call itself. So let me call myself and see exactly what it looks like when you are calling somebody. So you can see that it is coming on here, and then if I press answer, of course it's going to answer, but then it'll stay up there, which is awesome to see, and you can actually see the waveforms in real time. So if I long press on it, you get a little bit more information, but then also if I just let it do its thing, you can actually see that there is a waveform happening in different colors, and right now it's showing them kind of meshed up because I'm talking with both phones, but one of them is going to be green and the other one is going to be orange to indicate who is speaking and what they're saying and how loud they're saying it. So having that live waveform is something that I love to see. So next up, let's talk about navigation. I'm using Google, but this works obviously with Apple Maps as well. So if I navigate to here, press start, and then swipe up, it's going to show up on the dynamic island with a little indicator saying that you're actually doing some live GPS tracking. Then if I long press on here, you can actually tap in and go over here. And it works a little bit better with Apple Maps, but I'm personally a Google Maps user, but just know that this does work very well, and it can give you turn-by-turn directions when you are, let's say, walking, or if you are driving in your car. And then another one that I use all the time is if you swipe down and then if you screen record, first if you long press on here, you can decide if you want the microphone on or off. But if I press start recording and swipe up, you can see that there's a countdown happening right there, and then it's going to actually start recording, and you see that little red light saying that I'm actually screen recording right now. And as you can see, there's two different live activities happening. We're tracking with Google Maps as well as screen recording. And again, if I tap into it, I can just tap in here, and then it's going to give me the live activity. We'll pause it, save recording, and then we're all done. And you can even tap on here again to see that live recording in the Apple Photos application. And then one of my other favorite use cases for the dynamic island is going to be live and real-time sports notifications. So the best way to do this, in my opinion, has been if you go into Apple's native sports application. So if you go into sports, you tap in here, you set up your favorite teams, you set up what you want to see, and then you obviously are going to get live alerts when it does start. It's hard to show right now because it's the morning, there's no sports going on, but up here it'll give you the score on each side of what the sport is, but then also the little logo. So here it will show Arkansas on one side, Miami on the other side, as well as the live score, which is great to see. And I love to see that because at the end of the day, we can't watch every single game of all of our sports teams, but being able to see kind of a live score at a glance is something that I absolutely love. Now this next category of dynamic island features is going to go into the category of at-a-glance information in the moment, right? Because each one of these, when you're not in the moment, they're not going to be very useful, but when you are in the moment and you need to know this information, it is an amazing use because it does help out in every single way. So the first one has to be in the United application or something called Flighty. Being able to track in real time your boarding, your flight information, and everything you need to know, even down to where your gate is inside of the airport, is something that I love, especially about the United app. The United app, for instance, will let you know when you're boarding, if it's delayed or on time or early. It'll let you know which gate to go to. It'll let you know boarding time versus takeoff time, and it'll update you in real time even throughout your flight. So being able to have that in the United app as well as with Flighty is something that I really use every single time that I am flying. The same thing applies for information that you need on the go. For instance, if you're ordering food from Uber Eats or maybe from Starbucks, you do get the same kind of live activity information when it comes to when it's happening, when you place your order, that it's being worked on, when it's being shipped out to you, how far they are, what the estimated time of arrival is. All that information will be on your dynamic island and will be there at a glance until you remove it or until it does show up at your door. And this works with an abundance of different applications that do the same thing. Like I mentioned, Starbucks has this, Uber Eats has this, DoorDash has this, and then the same thing applies for the ride sharing services like Uber, like Lyft, and the other ones that we have across the world. And then in that same light, one that I use all the time, especially in my area because parking is very annoying and you have to pay to park wherever you go. If you park on the side of the road, there's normally a 1 to 3 hour limit to how long you can park there. You do have to pay for it, but with the app called Park Mobile, you do get a live feed on your dynamic island of how much time you have left in your parking meter. So A, you can either go back to it, or B, you can feed the meter whenever necessary, whether you are at a restaurant or you're out and about in some town. That one has been one of the most useful uses of the dynamic island of all time because it has saved me a ton of money on a parking ticket. So definitely look at the parking application you have in your local township or your town or your state and download that one because you will have some sort of live activity or some sort of dynamic island use case to allow you to track how much time is left so you don't have to continuously remember how much time you have left before you have to feed the meter. The next two go hand in hand when it comes to media controls and AirPlay. So first and foremost, if I go into my Spotify, and this will work with Apple Music as well, I'm going to turn the volume down so we don't get copyright striked. But let's say if I play a song right here, so I'm playing this nav song and then I swipe up, of course you're going to have your media controls in your dynamic island. First, you're going to see that you have the album art right there on the left hand side, and then secondly, you have the active and live real-time waveform of it happening on the right hand side. And then if I long press on here, you do get your media controls, which allows you to play, pause, as well as scrub through the timeline to be able to scrub to a certain section of a song. You still get the waveform, you still get the album art, and then you have your AirPlay button right here, which allows you to AirPlay to different parts of your room, whether it is your living room, your dining room, or anywhere else that you have, let's say, something like an AirPlay enabled speaker. And that's a perfect segue to talking about AirPlay on the dynamic island because it works the same way as your other media controls, where for instance, if I tap on this Mac Mini right here, where it is playing on my Mac Mini right now, and then I can, the same way I long press on this, you can see that it is playing on my Mac Mini by looking at that little logo right there, and then I'm able to play, pause, and control it that way. So being able to control your media locally from your iPhone, but then also locally on all your AirPlay devices is something that I love about the dynamic island, and again, it stays persistent when you want it to, and then you can hide it away if you need to. And now the last few for me, the next one has to be working out. So if I go down here and open up my Stronglifts app, I'm able to then track my workouts with the dynamic island without having to continuously go back into the application. So if I press start this workout, and then let's say if I tap one of these, and then a timer starts, I can swipe up, and then you can see that in my dynamic island, it is giving me the same exact countdown. So I have the countdown on the right hand side, I have the app logo. If I long press on here, I get a little bit more information, for instance, how long to rest and what my next exercise is, what set I am, and things like that. So overall, I love this use case for the dynamic island because it's less distracting. I don't have to continuously grab my phone and go into the application. I can just take a quick glance at it or long press on it when I am on the lock screen. And again, most of these, if I go on the lock screen, will have its own variation of a live activity that shows up here. So even if you have an older iPhone that doesn't have a dynamic island, you still have a pretty good idea of what's going on with live activities, just for you guys to know. And two more smaller games that I wanted to bring up before I bring up my favorite one that I've been using recently. I do want to talk about right here one that's called Hit the Island, which you guys have probably seen before. This is one of the first few ones that did come out, and it's very, very simple. It's a great way to pass the time, especially if you commute or on a train or something like that. Basically, it's a Pong game where the goal is to hit the island as many times as you can, and as you can see, it'll take count and see exactly what's going on. And what I like about this is that it doesn't require any Wi-Fi or data, so if you're commuting on a subway where there isn't any data, it'll still work. The next one we have is going to be Pixel Pal, so if I go in here, it's kind of like a Tamagotchi. If you go in here, we press on, and then you can see, if you look very closely, that I have a little kind of animal right there that's kind of walking around. I can tap him, and if I swipe up, he'll show up right there. I can long press on here to feed him, to play with him, to add another one. His name is Rupert, just in case anybody was wondering. And then the last one that I do want to bring up, which you might have seen in the very beginning of the video, has to be the ability to use your dynamic island as a notes clipboard. So this works very easily, and my favorite use case is being able to just have my email on there. So if I go over here and go to the application, you have the ability in the free version to have 3 different things you can copy and paste from. So I have a test one, don't forget to buy broccoli, and then my email. It's a fake email, don't try to email me. But again, if you enable the live activity, then swipe up, you can see that I have a 3 right here. If I tap into that 3, or long press on that 3, you have the ability to go between them and delete them, copy them, or actually just exit out completely. So what I like to do is put my address on here, or my email, or some things that I usually always text or always email that it's always there, and I can just copy it, and then I can actually just paste it somewhere else. So if I go into maybe like a notes application, you can see that my email does show up there. So being able to have that quickly to be able to maybe copy and paste something into an iMessage, or copy and paste something into an email is something that's been very, very useful. And as you can see, I long press on there, it's right there. I can tap into here. If I want to add a different one, I'll delete this one, add something else, press return, then swipe up, tap on here, and you can see that something else does show up there. So those are my favorite dynamic island use cases. Definitely check some of them out, and I will leave them linked down below, but let's finish up this video. So that will just about do for this video, everybody, and to pick a favorite out of all these dynamic island utilities and features and applications, it's hard to really pick one because of the fact that they're used in so many different use cases in different ways. For instance, in the moment when I am at an airport, the most important version of my dynamic island is to view when my gate opens up and when I'm supposed to be at my gate, or when I'm maybe at a restaurant but I park my car, being able to see how much longer I have before I have to feed the meter before I get a parking ticket. So it's all relative and depends on when the dynamic island is showing itself off, but at the end of the day, it's one of the more useful things because at a glance, it gives you information that you otherwise would not have been able to see. So in my opinion, dynamic island is a great use case for a lot of different applications, and leave a comment down below of your favorite use case, whether it is in this video or maybe one that I didn't mention before. But that'll do it, everybody. If you did make it to the end of this video, leave a little dolphin in the comments down below so I know you made it to the end. And as I said, leave your favorite dynamic island feature or application and I'll definitely check it out. But if you want to watch more videos like this one, definitely check out one of these videos right here. And if you want to learn a little bit more about the magic of the Apple ecosystem, definitely click on our most recent video right here. But until next time, I'm Fernando, and I'm out of here, everybody. Peace.